Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Kogan. I'm often asked to talk about healthy aging and integrative geriatrics, sort of, and how I view these topics. The whole issue of longevity, life prolongation, life biohacking, of course, it's a huge topic. It's very popular nowadays. There are large organizations. There are a number of very good experts who are positioning themselves in different ways. But in this short video, what I wanted to do is to give you a brief review of how I see this topic more practically, and also how I, in clinical settings, address it with every patient. So I think just if you are in your 30s, 40s, or even younger, talking about living past 100 is probably very practical, and more importantly, it's actually quite important, because if you start planning for that now, your chances of success are going to be significantly higher. I don't think it's in most of the experts' doubts that generations that are being young now going to get to that goal within next decade or two. The question is, though, what to do for the current population that is over 45 or over 50. A lot of the patients in that age group have multiple medical problems. They take a number of medications. Their health is just not what you would consider perfect. More importantly, they don't really have an infrastructure to maintain their health unless they're pretty well off, spend a lot of time thinking about it, and also a lot of time planning for it. Those of you who've been following me for quite some time, of course, know that I've discussed this topic in different angles at different times. But this is more of a way to think rather than that I'm not going to talk about anything specific. I will tell you that my book, Optimal Aging, is coming out next year. And this is part of Andrew Weil public series. And of course, you'll see much more details in that book. You also have books like Younger You by Cara Fitzgerald, who I interviewed just a couple of weeks ago, which goes into extreme practicalities of a particular lifestyle issues, etc. But what I'm really wanted to tell you now is really a framework. And so the framework has several parts. So the one part is your current medical team. That's typically a primary care doctor. You may have a couple of different experts, a couple of different specialists. You may have a physical therapy. You may have some holistic or alternative providers. So that's your current team. And that team, generally speaking, unless you're very lucky, it does not have a very specific advanced expertise in looking at how to make you live longer. They are in the business of maintaining your current health status, and they're also in the business of preventing certain complications, like preventing certain cancers, giving you vaccines so you don't get acute infections, etc. But that's quite different from actively engaging in a healthy longevity. And so there is an interface between those two things, but the current medical infrastructure simply does not have it. And so then you have a couple of choices. You can align yourself with a couple of movements. You can align yourself with a biohacking movement, which basically says, look, what is evidence for particular intervention that's not currently, evidence with randomized trials, but it has some evidence. And then you're trying it yourself. So biohacking is N of 1, essentially. So N of 1 means you are your own clinical trial. And that's fine. There are certain things that I personally do that I would consider biohacking myself. Of course, cold exposure would be one. Intermittent fasting. Well, intermittent fasting is now moving away from biohacking. I think it's becoming standard. But taking certain supplements like nicotinamide riboside would be biohacking, which I do advocate for. Taking methylated B vitamins at pretty high doses, if you have particular methylation defects, probably could be considered biohacking. So that's one domain. And next domain is what I would often discuss think of as a radical longevity lifestyle. So what does that mean? you can ask me, well, wouldn't that be a plant-based diet and lots of exercise, good sleep, mindfulness, good community support, very meaningful activity? Sure, that's all of those things. But the word radical in there means that you're following the best current practice or the best current evidence you have. And that's where I think get a little sticky. But of course, there are some people who think about kind of a really current modern things like metformin and certain vitamins, like I mentioned, riboside and rapamycin and all those other bioprotectors. So that's one. Then there's, of course, the camp where I align myself a bit more. What is a current best historic evidence? And of course, that's blue zones, and it's also a certain set of practices that are currently historic practices that are currently showing significant promise. So definitely heat and cold exposure. So living outside of the comfort zones of temperature comfort zones. Definitely some form of intermittent fasting. Definitely a very specific types of exercise, and those not just endurance. In fact, I'd say endurance is probably less critical. I think is much more important that you do balance training and core strength. So those would be probably more important in a way. Or I would say, to me, that's even engaging in a long-term practice of yoga, tai chi, martial arts, or something that has a very strong, significant progressive component. So people who are serious about martial arts, they don't just learn one form, they keep on learning new forms. So you basically allowing your system to continuously adapt and improve even as you get older. So it wouldn't be surprising that a master in their 60s knows way more forms and actually in some ways is way stronger than in the 40s. So that's actually very critical as concept. We used to think that past 30, 35, the performance starts to decline. And yeah, maybe achievement of certain athletic feats, like a speed of marathon running or length of jumps would start decline with age. But lots of things do not, or they do in very slowly. And because you're learning more and more experience, you actually get better and better results. So, certain things are actually will continue to improve way into 60s. And it's essential you do so if that's what you're interested in, right? So then comes a really critical aspect, which is heavily underrepresented in not just medical field, but often even in some longevity circles. And that is understanding your own genetics, understanding your own drivers that are sort of your weak spots, if you will, your Achilles tendons. And it's usually more than one. And that is really a whole topic in itself. Some of these things, I know I have a very significant coronary artery disease history in the family. I know I have thyroid problems in the family. So I know some of it already, but I also did a pretty comprehensive genetic test, so I can look into this a bit more thoroughly and say, what can I specifically modify now? So I know I'm already talking longer than I expected. But in essence, what I'm trying to say is, if you're interested more in this topic and you want to continuously think through this, over time, I'll be putting some resources here. But more importantly, I think what I'll be doing is, instead of relying on other people's expertise, I personally will be sharing certain critical aspects of the continuous modification of this field as I go with it. And I will continue positioning myself not necessarily as a longevity expert, because I actually don't think that's what I do, but really as a person who integrates some of the important longevity principle with your current list of medical problems, with your current healthcare status, and how this interface it can be practically continuously improved. So how can you continuously work on your own health, knowing those two ends and knowing that they're not necessarily easy to merge at the moment, because of course the medical field, the medical industrial complex is actually denying the whole point in essence, and basically saying, look, this whole field of longevity is quackery and whatnot. Just like 30 years ago, everybody was denying that acupuncture has a benefit. So things will mature that way. There's no question. But academia is always lagging in process time, and always a little bit slower. And that's a good thing, actually, because you want some conservatism in the medical system, so that you don't adopt things that will turn out to be harmful or completely lacking any kind of evidence, and just because somebody said so, and they have financial interests usually, that you're going to follow that. So stay tuned, friends. I'll keep doing those short talks, that'll be only one part of my channel. There's of course going to be other things, but I do find that this way works best for me. I tried some other things, but subscribe. Have a good day. Bye.